Hello, welcome back to the YouTube channel of Bethel Evangelical Free Church, Hanley. I'm Pastor Gervais Charmley. This is another Staffordshire church. This is in the Moorlands, the beautiful Anglican parish church, ancient parish church of St Edward the Confessor, Cheddleton. Now, St Edward's is noted for a number of things, most importantly the windows, which are by Edward Burne-Jones. But also there is a connection between this church and St Edward's Hospital, which was a psychiatric hospital that's now closed, of course, like most of them that stood in the village or near the village. Well, we'll have a look around and say this is a medieval parish church. It has ancient origins, but much of what we see today, of course, is the product of a Victorian restoration. So as usual, we start at the west end, in fact, in the tower. And you can see this is one of these Victorian restorations, but what they've done is they've created a rood screen, so relatively high church design. There's some 13th century work here, 14th century work here. There's a nice, actually in the tower, but there's a nice false ceiling up there. There we have a memorial to do with former residents of St Edward's Hospital. And their memory of the members of the staff of St Edward's Hospital who died serving their country in the Second World War. So 4 of them, and then there's the 1914, 80, and there's 19 here. One more, of course, because 19 is when the treaty is passed that actually is signed, that actually ends the war formally. So here we are inside. This is, of course, you've got your 2 aisles, north and south aisle. We'll start in the south aisle because that's where the font is, and there's the font there. So back to the font. This is the font. My interruption. But this is the font. It's alabaster. It's Victorian. There was a restoration here by Sir George Gilbert Scott, and basically what we see today here is Gilbert Scott's work, his restoration. Let's see, the windows are quite interesting. We have here St Aidan and St Chad, among the men who missioned this area. St Chad, of course, first Bishop of Lichfield. We have a trio of rather nice Burne-Jones angels here. So 3 angels. 3 angels with their trumpets. Again, this is pre-Raphaelite stuff. There's a later window here, the Ascension. Very muscular eagle lectern, very solid structure really, and integral whacking great candlesticks. And eagle means business. Pulpit, of course, is again Victorian. You can see here your 13th century columns here. It's just a 12th century origins, but it's largely 13th, 14th century. Organ pipes, quite probably mock organ pipes up there. They would have an organ back there, but that is no, the organ is back there. The console is in the chancel. That explains why I can't find the console. And so into the chancel we have some Penda and Ethelbert. That's to do with a bit further. Yeah, that's to do with Hereford really, but and again there's St Louis and St Charles. That is, of course, a Charlemagne, and a very nice 14th century sedilia with ballflower. Ballflower is a typical 14th century decoration. You can see here ballflower, got your 3 petals enclosing a ball, and that's why it's called ballflower. Big window, east window. You've got Christ flanked by the evangelists, St John, St Luke, St Mark, and St Matthew. Relatively high church setup, of course. Triptych is closed because it's a Lent, which gives a better view of the east window, which is nice. More windows, factory improvements, in memory of John Herbert Bowman, vicar of this parish, 1951 to 72, and Enrolled of Leek, 67 to 72 again, so died in 72. Constantine and Helena, of course, there's a legend that Helena, mother of Constantine, is British, hence these are basically people associated with Britain in some sense. We've got a nice piscina up here, again, bit of 13th century work, bit of restoration, but ballflower, very good bit of ballflower. It's rare to find ballflower up here in the Moorlands, actually. So here we are, and you see, because the other thing here is Edward the Confessor, and these are royal saints who are associated with royalty, like Edward the Confessor, who is the penultimate Anglo-Saxon king, and of course it's his Norman connections that lead to, you've got quite a lot here, his Norman connections that lead to the Norman conquest and Duke William. And there we have St Edmund and Alfred the Great, the fathers of the Royal Navy, allegedly. Victorian screen, not a lot to say about that other than George Gilbert Scott, really. South aisle, and again we've got nice windows, but the notable one here again is Burne-Jones, St Cecilia, and of such the kingdom of heaven, and Jesus increased in wisdom, so Jesus, the boy in the temple. And here we have Ruth and Boaz. Christ, the good shepherd. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. It's a fairly relatively gloomy interior because there's no wall plaster. But you can just see up there, there's the old entrance to the rood loft from when there was a rood loft. But there is no chancel arch anymore. There's just a wooden Victorian arch. So it's been opened up for more Reformed worship, and then it's been turned back into a more Catholic, medieval style worship. We have here another stained glass window. We've got sacrifices of Cain and Abel, and so on. And a bit of embroidery. Leek was noted for its embroidery, and there's an altar frontal. It's now, of course, at the back here. The first recorded incumbent here was a man called Peter in about 1200, so about when these arches here were built. And one interesting thing to look at, of course, is always to do with, well, is there any change around 1662? And there isn't here. So we're looking here at an incumbent who conformed at the Restoration, probably. Just normally you see some kind of change. So that is the inside here at Cheddleton. And so here we are outside at Cheddleton, and you can see this impressive 15th century tower, maybe even 14th century this tower, but it's an impressive old tower, and then the big red sandstone church. So when I look around the outside, of course, reflects much more the historic appearance of the inside, which reflects very much a Victorian restoration and a particular idea. It's, of course, interesting to compare and contrast this with Pugin's little church at St John's, Alton, which is an attempt to get back to the 14th century by someone who actually done a bit more study than Scott. There's this awful thing that Victorians have, oh, we need to expose the internal stonework. No, you don't. The internal stonework was never meant to be exposed. So we'll have a look around the outside and then say some closing remarks. So a number of features to be noted here. The churchyard cross, the base and the bottom part of the shaft, you can see where it's weathered at the bottom and less weathered at the upper part. The upper part is Victorian, but the lower part is medieval. So they didn't tend to have gravestones in the Middle Ages. You'd have a shared cross for everybody. It's a typical big medieval church. You can just see beyond that's the church hall, basically. A typical big medieval church. You've got two aisles, no spire in this case, big stone roofed, porch. The roof now is covered in Victorian tiles, but probably would have been covered in big stone slabs itself, carriage stone. There's the priest's door, usual door for the priest to come in. I say priest's door because of course it's medieval, and the priest's door, and he would be able to come in then to the chancel, have his own access, rather than coming in the main door, which could be quite useful coming in through there. There we have it. Often you find these things. The village pub is next to the church. Quite convenient. Also, these two are, the pub and the church are your institutions, if you will, and if you won't, they still are. So here we are, East End, big window, that obviously Victorian tracery in there. You can see some of the older tracery. It should be that's a bit simpler, and up and down and round. Be a bit careful here because it's picking way around the graves. Down to the north side. North side you have usually have a vestry, and a vestry here is unusual. It sticks out where you'd expect a north porch to be rather than sticking out of the chancel, but that's of course is to preserve the windows of the chancel. Medieval churches didn't always have vestries, and this one certainly didn't. Again, nice 14th century windows along the chancel there, so the chancel from that, there's certainly rebuilt in the 14th century, but of course there would have been an earlier chancel, probably in its 12th century origin of the building. Big aisles here, and what the big aisles do is they allow for the church to have seating, and of course also in the Middle Ages you've got just two side chapels, side altars, because one thing that's important there is a number of these old gravestones, and some of them with these almost traditional, well, very well traditional really, epitaphs. So here we've got Josiah, son of Thomas and Francis Fernahoff of Flathead, who died May 17th, 1851, aged 40 years. Affliction sore I long time I bore, physicians were in vain. Did God just please give me ease and free me from my pain? And I've seen that inscription elsewhere. It's a traditional inscription for those who died after a long and painful illness. It's a reminder that indeed sometimes the physicians are in vain, and more so. Here we have a memory of James Goldstraw. The rest is gone, but there's another. Goldstraw's a good local name. Barber, Wood, all these typical North Staffordshire names, and this nice red sandstone, warm colour. The trouble, of course, with red sandstone on the inside, it's a dark colour, and therefore it makes for a fairly gloomy interior when they take the wall plaster off. This is, of course, a pet peeve of mine, is the removal of wall plaster in medieval churches. Not least, of course, because wall plaster, if there's medieval plaster there, there's going to be at least some remains, most likely, of medieval wall paintings. And here we have someone from later Sneed Green. Sneed Green, it's actually where the manse is now, so it's where I live. And you can see the wonderful setting there. You just see over there the tower of, I think it was Longsdon Parish Church. So Leek's over that way, and Longsdon's over that way, and Stoke-on-Trent is over that way somewhere. But we're high up in the moorlands. There's the vestry at the back, very common. And see just how many gravestones there are here. Everyone has pushed together, because of course Cheddleton at one point served an enormous parish, now been subdivided. There's the Victorian Church Hall, quite nice, and this nice tower, towering upwards as towers are wont to do. We're here on the edge, and you can look down. You've got this wonderful view of the scenery. There's Leek over there, and the hills beyond. So, and it really is. It's a lovely. It's a lovely location up here. And of course, today it's quite a smart area. Because of that, it's close enough to Stoke-on-Trent. If you work in Stoke, here we are. Here's the church hall, and nice 15th century west door, because of course processions and such like, you need to be able to process out and around. And there's the lich gate. The lich gate, of course, from an Old English word for corpse. And the battlefield cross here, made by the men of his regiment, was brought from the grave of Thomas Humphrey Sneed, 4th Battalion, Lancashire Fusiliers, formerly the Queen's Bays, and only son of Major General Sneed of Ashcombe Park, Staffordshire, killed in action and buried at Ploskiert. That's the trouble with these Dutch names. November the 2nd, 1914, reinterred at the British Cemetery at Messines Ridge. And captain, only son of Major General, and notice again his father's a Major General. The idea that these generals in the First World War are just all men throwing other men's sons away, nonsense. They're ordering their own sons at times to action. A military family, and it's one of the things is you have to remember that the British Army, there's this aristocratic and military tradition, and that means that it's the upper classes who actually proportionally suffer more. Numbers wise, of course, it's all the private soldiers, but in terms of every attack, I've said it before, every assault, every offensive needs its junior officers leading, and they suffer awful casualties. Families get wiped out. The Sneed, and Major General Sneed, own son and heir killed. So no, we don't talk about. That's why one of the reasons why the Lions Led by Donkeys claim about the British generals is really nonsense. But that's a matter for another type of video, not this one. Here we are back at the porch, and back at the south side of the church. I'll just peer in the porch briefly. Because it's a very nice door. Carved. There's Edward the Confessor here. There's St Edmund. Yes, and St Edward. So St Edmund, because he's martyred by the Danes. And down here we've got all things bright and beautiful window, and the boy Christ. Memory of the Masquerade family of Leek. So there we are, and there's a churchyard across. I think I just call this church by the name of the neighbouring church. St Edmund's Leek, of course, is not this church. This is St Edward's, Cheddleton. St Edmund's Leek is in Leek. So there we have it. One of the bigger moorland churches in a little very, well, not so little anymore, but still very picturesque moorland village, and lovely location. Well, thank you for watching. It's looking like it might rain any minute, but thank you for watching, and may God bless you and keep you until next time.